got everyone who's supposed to be here, so I'm going to start, jump right in. Hi, Jared. Hi, Heidi. First of all, I just want to start out by thanking everybody for volunteering your time to join us as part of this new venture for us. As I'll talk about in a moment, and I think pretty much everyone in this call is aware, Designers for Learning just started out as a project idea I had when I was an adjunct. And so it's slowly grown where we had a board of directors, formalized and became a 501c3 nonprofit. And this is our first time in having committees to help us in a leadership capacity. So we have a program development committee, this committee, the marketing PR committee, and then also a fund development committee. So this week is my week to kind of get everybody onboarded and give everybody a chance to understand the organization and ask for your help in various areas. So I really want to thank you. And for the purposes actually of recording this, I think I might just start out here by putting in the date. Yep, we're recording, we're good. So with that, let's just jump right in. I wanted to talk about the agenda a little bit. The first thing I want to do is make sure everybody has a chance to meet each other through some introductions. So in a moment, if you could just share your background, give us a little overview, and maybe if you have some interactions previously with Designers for Learning, if you could share it to help us all get a perspective of your involvement and kind of why you're volunteering with us. Then I wanted to spend a little bit of time. I think it's important for us as we start setting a course for our marketing and PR strategy for you to have an understanding of what our mission is and what some of our strategic goals are. And then through that, I'll also highlight some of our current and ongoing projects and programming. And then we'll really get into the heart of the meeting and talk about what this committee, the aims of this committee, and then looking ahead to establishing goals. So with that, I'll stop talking. And if we could maybe just go down the list we've got in the participants. Jared, if you don't mind kicking us off, just give us a brief introduction.
Sure. I'm Jared Stein. I lead the higher ed strategy at Instructure. We make the software Canvas and Arc and a few other things. And I've been with Instructure for about 7 years. That's kind of how I got connected with Designers for Learning. They offer their courses on the Canvas network, our open online course platform. But before being with Instructure, I've been in higher ed for a long time, a dozen years plus, doing online and blended course development.
Yeah, you've been a huge friend to us, and we really thank you for giving us our start to run a MOOC. And also, personally, Jared, you've been a good friend. You joined our Ed Impact Day, which we'll talk about later. We're hoping to kick something like that off again. It's kind of a fall campaign that we did a couple of years ago. So thank you for those past things you've done for us, and also for joining us. And Jeff?
I'm next. So my name is Jeff Gumas, and I come from the publishing side of things. I was a teacher for 4 years, and then was in educational publishing for 15 with Pearson, Education in their elementary division, and then the last 8 years up until May of last year with McGraw-Hill Education in their adult education and workforce group. So I actually met Jennifer and got connected with Designers for Learning towards the end of my time at McGraw-Hill, where I was kind of teetering on maybe I don't want to be on the publisher side of things. I still want to be on the curriculum side, but I just felt limited in terms of what we're able to do with some of the really innovative things that are happening with technology and free and open education resources. So I met her at an event related to digital technology with adult learners, and we sort of stayed connected. And then I finally jumped ship in May of last year and started my own nonprofit focused on OER resources for adult learners. And so there's a lot of overlap in the work that Jennifer and I have been doing or want to do with our respective organizations related to getting free and open education resources into the hands of instructors and learners. Hers is from the content development and resource development side, and mine is from the delivery side and the organization of resources around adult competencies. So, and I'm in Chicago as well.
And I see Jeff almost every day, I think, right? we recently joined the Chicago Literacy Alliance, and that's been a really big part of our strategic direction. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But Jeff and I, as he said, he's a nonprofit, and so we're part of a consortium of about 125, probably approaching almost 130 nonprofits in Chicago, based 100% with missions related to literacy. And so while not all are based on adult literacy and adult education issues, it is kind of a common thread through all of them that they have that literacy focus. So Rebecca, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Rebecca Peterson. I'm based in Boston, and I oversee a free open online initiative sponsored by the Cornerstone on Demand Foundation called nonprofitready.org. So Nonprofit Ready is a free learning portal for those of you that are running nonprofits or looking to start a nonprofit. And it's all self-paced on-demand learning for the sector. And I previously was at edX as part of the startup team at edX.org doing MOOCs back in the day. And it's through that work at edX that I met a colleague of Jennifer's, Dave Cormier, who does Rhizomatic Learning. And if you know Dave's work, or gave us basically, his claim to fame is he gave us the word MOOC.
He did. He coined the term. We can blame him, right?
Yes, we can blame Dave and all the Canadians. So Dave is the one who, through some of the things that Dave does, I got connected to Jennifer, and Jennifer actually kindly serves on our kind of ad hoc intermittent advisory board to Nonprofit Ready. So, I channeled my MOOC work and my open online learning work into the work of the foundation. And for those of you that may be familiar or not familiar, Cornerstone on Demand, it's based on the West Coast. We're a tech company, but focus on, we have an LMS platform as well, but also HR talent management technology. And the foundation is its own nonprofit, and we pivot a lot of those technologies and tools to do free open learning, not just for nonprofits, but we also have one called Disaster Ready, which is focused on humanitarian aid in the NGO sector. And we also do some work in K-12. I'm also the interim director right now of teachingready.org, one of our new initiatives. I do
wow. I don't think I even knew about that one, did I?
No, that's new. That's new after this quarter. But prior to all of this, I've worked in higher ed for most of my career. I started nonprofits doing museum education, went back to grad school, was somewhat handy with technology, but program design and curriculum and learning, and then just timing is everything, and started working in higher ed, actually building online programs as an instructional designer and leading instructional design teams to design professional learning. And so that's me in a nutshell.
Yay.
So I'm excited to be here and working with everyone.
This is great. This is exciting. Shmeli, you want to go ahead?
Hi, I'm very new to education actually. I'm an engineer and I did an MBA that was long back, and I was working in several companies and then teaching at universities in India. We moved to the US some 2.5 years back when I joined the PhD program at Purdue University. I just changed my career. Like, I've left my writing job and management things, and I enrolled in a master's program in instructional technology when I lived outside. I was in Dubai at that time. Then after I finished my master's, I joined the PhD program, and that is when I enrolled in the Designers for Learning MOOC, the first MOOC, because I actually wanted some experience in instructional design, which I've never done before. I've taught, but I've never designed a course. And that is when I got attracted to this adult learning and the way the course was conducted and presented by Dr. Jennifer and her team. I was really impressed by what they were doing. And after that, I think I took all the 4 MOOCs offered by Designers for Learning.
I think you are. Yeah, you're probably the one who's taking them all.
Yeah, so I kept doing it again and again. And I kept asking my peers also to enroll in the MOOC. So they were also very interested. And the previous time, Dr. Jennifer gave me an opportunity to be a facilitator also, and I really enjoyed that experience. And now again, she's asked me to be a part of this, and I'm very happy for this. But I don't have much experience in higher education in the US, and adult education is also new to me, but I think I can contribute because I myself I'm a student now, so I consider myself a part of the adult education. And as an instructional designer, I think I can do something for Designers for Learning.
Oh, absolutely. Your perspective, as you said, you've got the perspective as a participant as well as then a facilitator. And then also you did a few research papers, right, that you presented on your experience, kind of an ethnography of what
I'm
it was
still
like.
writing that. I actually finished one draft of it, and I got some feedback from my advisor. I'm writing an auto-ethnography on my experience in the MOOC. Like I'm writing about my 2 perspectives, like as a learner and as an instructional designer. So I consider the instructional designer side as the teaching side for the adult learners. So it's a dual role that I'm trying to picture in my paper. And actually, I had a lot of courses, and I was too busy with my work this semester, and just ended last week. And so I'm free during this vacation. I'm
Summer
planning to
started,
work on it.
yay. That's wonderful. So Rebecca, like we worked on personas in your in our
Yep.
your advisory group. Here's your persona right here from one of our both a perspective of the student as well as facilitator. And last and certainly not least, Heidi, would you like to introduce yourself? Just getting off an airplane, I believe, right?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm waiting for my luggage currently. So sorry that you can't see me. But my name's Heidi Kirby, and how I got connected with Designers for Learning is through the Instructional Design and Technology program at Old Dominion. I'm studying to get my PhD in Instructional Design and Technology, and I first joined Designers for Learning just to get some experience because I also didn't have any instructional design experience. My background is in English, and so I did the adjunct thing for about 5 years teaching college English. But through Designers for Learning and some of the classwork that I've done, I've just got my first instructional design position about 8 months ago, and I actually work for the NASA Safety Center here in Cleveland. So,
Also, are you physically in Cleveland? Is that where you're living?
yes,
Oh,
yep,
okay.
I'm an Ohio girl. That's where I'm from.
Oh, great. And then Dr. John Bakke is your advisor. Is that right?
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
Dr. Bakke is my advisor.
So John Bakke is the president of Designers for Learning's board. So this is where all these puzzle pieces come together. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share your backgrounds and interest in Designers for Learning. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but just to give you a sense of who is who, this is our Designers for Learning's board, including our officers. So Jeff is our secretary on the board. I'm the executive director. John Bakke, as I mentioned, is our president. So he's faculty at Old Dominion University. Monica Tracy is faculty at Wayne State University, and she's our vice president. And then we have Karen. I have to get a picture of poor Karen here. But Karen works at Northwestern Hospital. She's a statistician, and she's probably the first person from outside the instructional design community that has really tried to dig into what we do. So it's been really interesting to get her perspective as someone who's outside of the instructional design field. And then last but certainly not least, Jill Stefaniak and I started a pilot cohort back in, I believe it was like fall of 2013, spring of 2014, when we were just thinking this would be a cool project to do, to run with some students. And so we had a cohort of like 12 people, and now we've got, with our MOOCs, our numbers are in the thousands. So definitely Jill was the one with me right at the very beginning. So just to give you a little bit of a snapshot, I don't want to spend a ton of time, but just to kind of bring us all together in terms of trying to give you a sense for where we came from and where we're headed. As I mentioned, this started out as a little mom and pop shop with Jill and I doing a little small cohort. And what was interesting about that cohort as it relates to what we're doing today is we worked with a nonprofit in Michigan that was an adult education center within a rehab facility and a homeless shelter. And so we were hooked immediately. We knew that we'd found our purpose. And so we were given, the reason we started the cohort was to give instructional design students the opportunity to design instruction, as both Shamila and Heidi had mentioned. Unfortunately, it's a pervasive problem within our field of instructional design. We have a lot of accidental instructional designers, or even, unfortunately, people who complete programs but have not had the opportunity to get their hands dirty in real life context with real life learners and designing instruction. And so we started with those small cohorts, and unfortunately, we were turning away way more people than we could accommodate in the way we were facilitating them. And so we decided at that point, around midpoint of 2014, that we probably had something here, that this was maybe more than a project. And so we officially formed as a 501c3, foolishly thinking that would just open the floodgates for funding. It would just come our direction because we were now an official nonprofit. And that has not happened. So we're working on it. So then in 2016, this is where we kind of layer in Jared and the good folks at Canvas and Instructure. I reached out to his team, and we set up our first MOOC in 2016. And since then, we've had about 4,500 people join our service MOOCs. And like all MOOCs, as I'm certainly Rebecca can appreciate this and Jared as well, completion rates hover around 3 to 5%. And when I say completion, I mean turning in a full-fledged deliverable that we put up on OER Commons. So these are lesson plans that the students produce as OER, and they go out and sit out on OER Commons for the benefits of adult educators and their learners. But as I'm sure the others on the call that have participated, there's still a lot of active involvement in the MOOC, even though people aren't finishing. We also consider it kind of an advocacy as well. Most people are not familiar with adult basic education as an issue, as a need. And so we do take that very seriously. And that's really, again, why, if you look to the right side, we've really focused now in joining the Chicago Literacy Alliance and partnering with on-the-ground CBOs, community-based organizations, and others who are direct service providers working with with adult learners who are struggling to improve their basic literacy and basic math skills for employment or potentially going on to further their education. So that top line kind of talks a little bit about what happens on the free stuff we've been doing. And then to keep the lights on, because as I mentioned, we didn't quite have the success we thought with opening the floodgates to all these funders who are going to rush to us, we have started implementing for-fee design challenges. They're short experiences, and we charge a nominal fee, $20, but we've had a fair degree of success for the two that we've kicked off. We've had about 300 people sign up. So from July to now, it's been a way, just as I said, to put a little bit of money in the coffers to keep the lights on. And that's something that our program committee is working on now, thinking through ways that we can expand that offering of for-fee classes, as well as the free service projects and service learning courses that we offer. And please stop me. I'm just going to ramble a little bit here, but do stop me if I'm going too fast or if I'm skipping over anything. And Jeff, I think you can probably chime in on this. Jeff's been, I think, attending has attended about 3 of our board meetings since he came on the board. And this little sentence right here has been a source of, as I think for all nonprofits, a fair degree of discussion and thought. And so Designers for Learning provides educational resources and service learning experiences designed to promote all aspects of literacy. And I used to kind of chuckle at mission statements, thinking that was just some little marketing thing that they stuck up on a website. But, and I think, Jeff, you'd agree with me, as soon as we have our board meetings and start talking about potential things we could be working on, as soon as we deviate from this sentence, we get ourselves into trouble. So it is for us a pretty important, the service learning concept is a really big deal for us, as well as this idea of providing open educational resources to promote literacy, and in particular for the work we're doing now for adult literacy. So our constituencies then, it's kind of interesting that we're kind of serving two groups here. First and foremost, where we started our operation is with our instructional designers, and as I think has been mentioned several times already, they're joining us to gain instructional design experience. And then they also, there's very much a component of the service piece. So not only are they trying to get applied work-based experience, but they're also trying to find some opportunity to volunteer where they're giving back. And as I mentioned, the area we're giving back is adult basic education, and I put it in quotes because within our field that actually has a meaning. Adult basic education, and as contrasted to English as a second language or other areas. But for the purposes of our organization and the way we're thinking of things, it really, as I mentioned, these are adults that probably haven't finished high school, and if they have, they still have sufficient deficiencies in their basic skills that they need some type of additional educational exposure to be able to advance into better jobs or even employment at all. And then the second part of that is professional development, something we're thinking about expanding our lens to not only providing professional development for instructional designers, but for the thousands and thousands of adult educators, and they have their own slew of issues, which I could spend an entire hour talking about. But we think that's also an opportunity for us to expand our operations and the programming that we're doing to provide professional development for adult educators. And so this is really pretty important when we start thinking about our marketing and who our participants are and who our constituencies are. This really is kind of our bread and butter right here. And I think this is probably, the concept of service learning is probably very well known to everybody that's on the call, but we really do consider these pillars to be the foundation of what we do. So as I mentioned several times, this community service aspect, that's why we became a nonprofit versus potentially going down a for-profit avenue. We very much try to make all of our experiences in some way learning. People are very happy to use the resources they create on their portfolios, talk about them in job interviews, and then academic coursework. There's a lot of backfilling we need to do as we're unfortunately working with folks, as we mentioned, even people who are completing their masters and PhDs. There's some gaps in what they've been able to put into place in their programs. And so that is another component of the programming as well as the courses we work on. And so I think this group is probably pretty well versed in the adult basic skills gap, but these are the numbers that we just tend to see over and over. Certainly Jeff and I talk about them probably multiple times a day. The number that's thrown out is 1 in 6 adults performs at or below the lowest literacy levels. And unfortunately, that's roughly about 33, probably even more, million adults that are struggling with basic literacy gaps. But only about 1.5 million are supported by government-funded education programs. And so that is just a huge underserved need, probably one of the largest educational underserved needs I can think of or I've come across. And so that's why we put our stake in the sand here, that this is, this is what we're interested in working on. And then if you look on you all should have a copy, and I can send it out after as a reminder. The speaker notes of this includes just reams and reams of information about this need and the problem, which, if you're not as familiar with this segment, it'll give you a little bit of background. So our programming focus, I think is probably, I started to highlight a little bit as we've gone through, but this first and foremost continues to be our professional development focus on those free courses, whether they be MOOCs or some projects we may be considering that aren't MOOC related, with maybe smaller cohorts, or for-fee courses. The idea of creating these adult educational resources, developing them, where we house them, those are all issues we think about and contemplate all the time. What are we creating? Where are we putting them? How are we getting them in the hands of adult educators? And then third, certainly not least of which, is this idea of adult literacy advocacy. We're trying to think through ways that we can really embed that more deeply into our programming. So just to give you a sense, I think, Jared, you don't need to see the right-hand picture here. I think you're very aware of it. But we're an operation that works on an operating budget of literally $6,000 a year. So we are looking for free all the time. So our biggest programming courses, rather, are being hosted on Canvas Network. And then we also are using Thinkific for our for-fee courses. And we're not in love with this setup of having different platforms for things we're doing, but for right now, this is what we're able to do. So we've got our for-fee courses over on Thinkific, and then our Canvas Network is hosting our free courses. So long-term programming aims is to continue that professional development course, but then we're also hearing from feedback. We have surveys embedded within our Canvas courses, and also within our onboarding, like our intake form on our website, rather, where about 900 people have found us and gone to our website, filled out our contact form. They're not necessarily looking for these experiences to be embedded in a course. They're actually, we're hearing more and more people would be interested in thinking of ways we could do crowdsourcing projects, or maybe they take a small aspect of a project and work on it, and then maybe it's handed off to someone else who comes in to work on something. And for example, we're working right now potentially on a project where we would crowdsource the development of an adult literacy library. And what's cool about that, these are leveled readers, all geared toward adult topics, rather than having an adult read, for example, a Dick and Jane book or something like that. These are readings that are leveled to various reading levels that have already been prepared. And so what would be an opportunity for our service learners would be to come in and potentially write maybe Q&A or multiple choice questions, or reflection prompts, open-ended reflection prompts that relate back to that reading. And so that's something that somebody could do on a Saturday. Maybe you wanted to volunteer like 3 hours, so it's a bigger load, a less of a load and less of an ask than asking somebody to join one of our courses that takes people about 24 to 40 hours to complete. So that's something we're considering. And then we also have lots of opportunities that we're considering that could potentially be grant-based projects. Some of them along the lines of workforce development programs. That's a big buzzword within our area. Digital literacy skills are really big. And so there is some degree of funding that's out there. And that would be something where we would be more of a work for hire type project, where we would hire professional designers to work with us and to work with our adult education providers on a specific project tailored to the specifications of the grant. So now after that long, I hate these when I have to sit and talk. So hopefully now I can kind of be quiet and start engaging you in some input. So what we'd like as the board and what I'd like as the executive director of Designers for Learning, as I mentioned, everything up to this point has primarily been me, myself, and I, and a little bit of help here and there, but none from the board on marketing, PR. It's just not been something we've had time to even think about. We've been so focused on programming. So as I'll move ahead here, if you look at our presence as a company, like what our external constituents will see, both the instructional designers, potential funders, adult educators who come to try to understand us, they see what's on the website. We have webcasts monthly, and we have a long list of webcasts we've done. Certainly through our presence on our learning management systems. We are active members in a ton of conferences and organizations, both in instructional design as well as adult education. We probably should also consider maybe more what we're doing on the nonprofit side of things. Because of our MOOCs, we've generated quite a database of contacts. And so when we send out a newsletter, it's now going out to about 5,500 people. So that's a great way for us to reach folks. Same thing on social media. Our Facebook group has about several hundred, I think maybe even 600 or 700 people. LinkedIn group, 800. So we definitely have pockets where we can reach out to folks. My question and what I'd like to get everyone's input on as we move forward over the next 60 days or so is how effectively are we recruiting people? How effectively are we communicating our mission, our objectives, opportunities for people to be able to engage with us, to participate, to volunteer, to donate? That's something we've never looked at as an organization, let alone had someone come in from the outside to take a look and had kind of an unbiased view of what they see. So going back to that previous screen, what I'd love to see by the end of this year is if we could take this on as a project to kind of audit all of this, our marketing, and not just the presence part, but that to me is kind of a very important piece, but kind of look at it holistically and how are we doing from a marketing and PR standpoint, and then take that information and turn it in so we can be much more strategic in terms of how we're addressing all of those things. And then the third bullet point, we don't need to spend a ton of time on right now, but as I mentioned, we are going to have this fall Ed Impact campaign, probably focused around the topic of digital inclusion. It seems to be a topic that's kind of forefront for a lot of folks. And so that's something that we may be tapping you or asking for your input on whether you'd like to participate in helping us get that off the ground. So with that, I'm going to stop. And actually, I kind of prepped Jeff a little bit, and I'm going to call on him for a second. So Jeff, you see pretty much what we do every day here. So where do you think you personally or this group could help us in terms of this idea of auditing our marketing, PR, existing, don't want to call it a plan, our existence, I guess, and then taking that to the next level? Like, how could we then turn that into something that we act on, make changes? Oops, you're muted. Sorry.
I thought I was just going to be a passive observer today.
Sorry.
So, it's interesting because like when we met, you already had a pretty good following with the instructional design space. I think growing the presence and awareness in the adult ed space is a critical area. And I do think that the further sort of down the chain you go in terms of adult education, I think some of these PhD types that are doing stuff up here at a 30,000 foot level get you, or get us, I guess, Designers for Learning. But I think the further you go down, it's sort of like we don't know what this is. So I think understanding sort of how you're serving adult education, both for the adult adult educators, because they're ultimately the ones you want using these resources, is one big area. And then I think outwardly, outside of your sort of target constituents, I think it's really framing some problems, because again, in the instructional design world, I mean, I literally witnessed this with you at the Illinois conference, where this guy, Cole, just comes into the conference. So someone came to the conference that was not part of the conference, but saw Jen tweet that she was going to be there, and he came in off the street as someone who was an instructional design student, who was just like, yes, I had no experience, I didn't know what to do, da-da-da-da-da. So I think people in instructional design kind of know that, but sort of outwardly, particularly if you're talking about soliciting funding, understanding that problem is really important. But then also, I come from the adult ed side, and helping people understand the adult ed problem is a third component. So if I'm looking at challenges, I think the biggest challenges are helping adult education get designers for learning, but then outwardly helping, potential donors, potential folks who, might be funding projects, helping them understand sort of the problem solution, both on the service learning part and on the end user part in terms of the results of the work that we do.
That's great. Thank you. And then I don't know, Rebecca Schmueller or Jared, I don't know if you feel comfortable, ready to kind of to add your 2 cents in this conversation, but from your perspectives as starting with your organizations, Jared, you said, I think you must have been pretty much on the ground floor of Instructure, I'm assuming, right, when you started. So I'm sure you faced a lot of these same issues. We consider ourselves kind of going from, baby crawling to toddler, or maybe considered toddlers right now. So from your perspective, where do you kind of see us in this outward, sharing our message with the world on who we are and what we're about? What are your thoughts on that? Comparing it maybe to thought in structure.
Yeah. I appreciate the comments Jeff just made. So I would echo a lot of that. I mean, I think the one lesson that we learned that should be pretty obvious to folks, but perhaps is an area where I could help specifically, is around measuring the outcomes of the efforts. Right? Number one, making sure that the goals that we have for any particular project is well aligned to the challenges that the organization faces, and then having a disciplined way of measuring whether or not we're achieving these goals and thereby impacting the organization.
Yeah, that is definitely an Achilles heel. As we all know, it's a hard thing to do, and it's something we definitely. That's a great observation. And Rebecca, do you want to chime in?
I think, much has already been said, but I think you mentioned this in my introduction. Even as you were talking, I kept thinking of your personas. We spent a lot of time on that when I took the helm of Nonprofit Ready. There's like a lot of good content, but we weren't very clear on or ready to be clear on who we were trying to serve. And so we're kind of throwing a lot of things out. We knew we were here to serve the nonprofit sector, but really whom in particular are we a good fit for? And I kept thinking as, you were going through this, who are your, I hear the designer, I hear the adult space. I find, the instructional design universe, we have our own language and kind of a insular kind of community. So I think what's important is being able to come up with really clear talk tracks or kind of clarity that's more inclusive, inclusive language. So people who may not really understand that instructional design universe, why is that so important? Because it is a niche. I think we understand inherently why it's important, because we are instructional designers, or we've come up through instructional design. We get it on an innate level. But if there's anything I've learned in the last 2 years of trying to really build what we've been trying to do, is being clear on not only the personas, but also those call to actions for those personas. And I think you were getting to that a little bit, Jeff, on some of the things you were talking about, but what's really, it's not even the ask. What do you, after people learn about what you're trying to accomplish, what is it that can they understand clearly what it is they can do maybe to immediately help or get involved, or connect you with that person to get help or get involved, whether that be a funder or someone else that's maybe doing similar work? Because I think what will be key is, and you have some of this you're already bringing together, but who are those like organizations or complementary organizations, and you're already doing that, I think, through the Literacy Network, it sounds like. But who's kind of your little tribe there, that you're working somewhat together, but you're, have also your own kind of programming that you're doing, but you're complementary to, but people can understand it clearly. That's what I kept coming back to. It's like, I get this, but how does this all translate to someone that's going to be really new? And that's going to be important, particularly for funders, or as you grow your readership or lists beyond maybe the people who are taking the MOOCs, which is a good start, but that's kind of the inside community. Yeah. So how do you want to have an external community as well?
And that definitely came up. I'll just advance this again. When I talk about the conferences and the memberships, this was the first year I've broadened and gone out to the adult education conferences as an exhibitor. And exactly to your point, I've got my normal banner and my normal handouts that I give to AECT and our instructional design community. That just completely falls flat. It just has to be and plus they're more the end user of what it is we're creating, even though there is the professional development opportunity. So yeah, your point is really well taken there. I can say I've felt it many times talking to people about what we do. Shamili, did you have any thoughts on this, like from your perspective in terms of communication? Yeah. I guess you've seen from us, or your experiences as a participant.
As a participant, the only thing I was bothered about was the quality of the OERs that we created. Like we got very good feedback, but if it's possible to get feedback from the real users, like the ABE teachers or something, it'll be very good. So if we could connect to the teachers in the ABE centers, that'll be it'll be the most valuable thing. Like, are they really using it? Because we have a ton of OERs, and many of us created so many even during the courses. So it'll be nice if we know really if somebody used it and did that really help the adult learners. So that was one thing I always keep thinking about. And about the community centers, actually two of my friends approached me. Like they are trying to do something in the West Lafayette community where they're trying to make adult learners clear the exams, the GED and things. So I told her about our Designers for Learning courses, and I passed on the link also. So like that, I want to really connect to the users, the teachers, the ABE teachers, and the learners.
That's a great, and I think, Jared, that probably ties in a little bit to what you're talking about as well, right? Like how are not only outcomes in terms of completion and what are the designers doing, but how are we impacting the adult ed community? And that's great.
Yeah,
I love. Go ahead. Sorry, Jared. Go ahead.
I was going to say I love that comment, both because it's focused on the efficacy of the program itself, but it also would potentially produce content that you would then use in marketing to convince people that this is the right initiative to support.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yes. In our program committee, we are conducting an evaluation. We did get some modest funds to conduct a program evaluation. So hopefully pretty quickly we'll have some numbers coming out of that, including using the resources. But that's at an evaluation level. It's kind of a one-off. And I think bigger picture, it's something that's kind of bothered me. The best you can do right now in OER Commons is see how many people have accessed the resource and how many have downloaded it. You really don't have much input. And I think, Jeff, from your perspective, from your organization, that's something that you're thinking through is how can a user of an OER potentially maybe rate it or, have some type of, quick smile test or whatever as they're completing it. Things like that data like that, I think would be really helpful as well. So how do you think, what are your thoughts on how we could operationalize all these things we've talked about? So it's something that we could get by the end of the year, have something that we could actually take and implement. What are your thoughts on how we could conduct an audit? Should we focus on some of the things we talked about, like the personas, the outcomes? What are your thoughts on how to take this for the next steps? Any ideas?
Actually, I have something like, we have a ton of these resources. So maybe like we have a lot of instructional design students. So maybe I could ask some of them to not evaluate in the very professional sense, but at least go see if these courses that were created will really serve the purpose. Like, is it aligned with the syllabus and things like that? Will that help?
Yeah, and it would on the evaluation piece, because definitely we'll need help on that for sure. Yeah, so let's definitely talk offline about that for sure, because that's definitely what we will be seeking is some help on from expert review standpoint, as well as then the adult educators.
Jennifer, on a very elemental level, just speaking for myself, I do need to take a little, probably more time to familiarize myself. I've looked at your website, but really look at the website with the marketing trends and kind of see it's almost doing an audit of what's your existing, there's the program that you're doing, the courses and the design. And then, from a marketing PR standpoint, it's okay, well, how are we messaging that? How is it positioned? Does the web presence, the different social channels that you're utilizing align with where do we have alignment? Where do we not? And is it clear? And I think it comes back to just that really, and it helps kind of clarify, are we really clear? You're always refining the mission statement. Mission statements, they're good. And if you're doing it well, sometimes you're tearing your hair out to get it, precise. There's the mission and the vision statement. So I would say, do you have both? Kind of what's the bigger vision? What's the mission? Because I'm thinking from the marketing PR side, how anyone who comes across you, can they tell who you are? And then also you want your website or any collateral to, if designed well, you can send funders to a very specific part that they can clearly clear who you are. Prospective students or learners or people who are going to engage, maybe potential adult learning programs who want to partner with you. Is that really clear? And I think it's just starting very at the basics, getting the fundamentals down. And doing a little bit of audit of what you have, refining that, because that'll help, because then you'll start working on copying and then you'll start refining your message. And I think from there you kind of go bigger, to then figure out from there, okay, how does that work with a campaign? What kind of newsletters do we send out? Is it a newsletter that makes sense for everyone? Do we have to think differently about that? So I would start really basic with what you're doing now, audit, and then and if you need some of our time to, I'm volunteering, everyone on the committee, but I know I volunteer people on my committee. But as people have time, whether it's this committee or other, your circle of critical friends that's beyond this, if you will, to kind of help look at that. And I would invite people that have known nothing about what you do, if you, and you probably already are, but kind of, people who kind of are somewhat familiar, but really, would be looking at it as, someone who might want to fund you or partner with you in some way.
So do you think that, okay, let's kind of think through how that, what if we spent, I'm always thinking of timelines, what if we spent the summer, end of July, our goal was, especially the folks on this committee, as well as critical friends that we could come up with, I've got, these are all hyperlinks, by the way, that are all listed just to give us a sense. And then also in the notes, it gives you a sense for the memberships and conferences we attend. I think that gets to some of what you're talking about, just needing to spend a little bit of time doing a deep dive into some of these, just to see what it's all about and what's posted and what the engagement level is and things like that. So would it be appropriate if we circled back and say the end of July as a group had a chance to do this, and pull together some of our thoughts as far as then converting that into a plan? Does that resonate with what you're talking about, Rebecca?
Yeah, I think it's the timeline, what timeline makes sense for you, and maybe chunking it out. I'm not saying to replicate what we did with Dave with the sprints. That kind of can be helter-skelter, but it's almost true. We did with Nonprofit Ready, we used Slack and had the critical friends group before I had an advisory, and then with very focused questions throughout the course of a week, people as they could commit time to commenting, and then we focused people's energy on the feedback, and then I collected that up with Dave to make sense of it, to create the framework that we are still using part of today.
See, I had completely forgotten that you were the subject of that. Did you find that to be a helpful approach, the sprint?
Yeah, I did. So for those of you that have participated in a sprint, or if you're not familiar, from a software development, we weren't in a room together, but we gave ourselves 7 days and using a tool like Slack, people could hop on and hop off. And I found as, you know, the subject, or at least our site was the subject of that. It was helpful because from a practical standpoint, it's hard to get everyone online at the same time. The group that we had assembled was fluent enough with technology. I think it's not that medium isn't for everyone, but for people who have a certain fluency or comfort level with that kind of communication, it can work well. And I found that it was easy for me to kind of distill, because I had that transcript of the conversations. It was easy for me to kind of go through with Dave and really distill quickly the salient points, because we had a history of it. And then come back to the group and present out, did we summarize or did we capture what you meant, get some final feedback. And then I could then shape it a little bit more to use internally. So overall, I found it was useful because I, as you know, stepped into inheriting a portal that, you know, no one had, it was an idea, they had started it, but it had no strategic focus. So I was trying to brought him on. We have a good intention here. We got some funding. And, you know, we have some infrastructure. We think it's a good idea. So what do we do next? Which is, you know, why, you know, I had, you know, in different mediums, but I thought the format we used, and that's why I feel like this is a much more focused format. That was a little bit more free for all because it was so broad. I think with a topic like this, whether you do it as a Slack sprint or something else, I'm just trying to think over the course of a summer. Mm-hmm. Do you want to wait until the end of July to get actionable feedback? Or would you be better served to like get a trickle of certain, and this does depend on people's schedules, I'm aware of that, but, you know, or is it a way, does this provide you an opportunity to get some feedback to work on throughout the summer, as opposed to kind of getting the final report handed to you?
Right.
And then you kind of go, oh, okay, now we have 3 more months left in the year.
Right. And I think also the way we did I don't know why I completely blanked on that experience, because it was pretty important to you as well as, you know, the participant. I don't know why I blanked on that, but I think there is something to be said though for the synchronous aspect of it, because some of the things you could address pretty quickly. Like if someone was going off track, it's like, well, no, that's not really what, you know, rather than waiting.
You can play it back in.
Yeah.
And you know, and as much as people say I don't have time, there was something about just the mobile aspect of that medium. I think people, if they saw something that came through in the conversation thread that they could immediately respond to, they could, and then other people, you know, would chime in at different times. So think about that. I mean, and I think it would be very focused. I think you could do something that's just, is it around the website messaging? You start very basic, kind of like, well, this is, you know, because that really should be everything. You know, everything that you're trying to accomplish, you should be able to point people there. And then there are pieces of that website that go out to different, you know, social, you know, if you're seeing the website as the hub, not unless you're thinking of reversing that and being very socially driven and want everyone, you know, I've seen organizations try and do everything through Facebook. But it depends on the organization.
What we're really finding is our best conversion is our newsletters. So where we actually, you know, we can post for weeks on end about a new course and we'll get a couple hits. But then if we put out a newsletter, usually we can have a couple hundred enrollments in the afternoon just from one newsletter. Yep. So that tends to be, but then as you're saying, the content of that is also tends to be the same types of things you're covering on the website as far as your frequently asked questions about the course or whatever it may be. So the messaging that we use on the website really does translate over to
and it's not easy. We're going through a whole website, our marketing site redesign. We redesigned the internal portal. Now we're doing that, and it should seem easy, but it's work.
It is really, especially like you said, you get familiar with your own language and how you're saying things, and then you're like, you don't think about how that resonates with others.
We just spent like 40 minutes debating how it works, which maybe we went a little too far with that. But that's an example of like, okay, like what does this mean? But I think too, so if you're getting a lot of, and I think we'd even talk about the newsletter, there's like the website strategy and then there's the communication cadence, like, and knowing what you get for your, you know, what kinds of communications are you sending out? What, you know, do you send a long form newsletter? Are you better off kind of frequency, shorter communications, but more frequent? You know, that fine line of people unsubscribing and then, you know, you're trying to call them to action. So what's the focus of the newsletter to date to kind of inform them and then get them to enroll right now in something new coming up usually? You know, and depending on what your calendar is, you know, how do you want to is that working now? What do you want to experiment with? You know, and you can just even audit that cycle kind of to see how it's working and what people prefer, what you see, and Do you use MailChimp or what do you use?
We do, yeah. We were using Nation Builder, which is actually, it's kind of a nice platform. It incorporates more of the social media as well as the, so you can see people's Twitter activity. But as I said, that tends to not be really where we get a lot of the conversion. Get a lot of activity maybe, but not necessarily people signing up. So Jared, I don't want to, we're kind of talking about the messaging on the website and things like that, but what you mentioned is so important, the measuring the outcomes. Like how do you think the best way to approach that piece of it would be? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is part and parcel to the planning or the results of the audit. I think, once we start writing down all of the different ways in which you have been marketing, you have been getting the message out, and kind of start to connect those with what you intended the outcome to be, or what the objective was, then you kind of get a sense of, here's why some efforts may have been more effective than others. And then I think that's a really good spot from which to articulate, here are our goals for a period of time. And in order to achieve those goals, we think doing X, Y, or Z will help lead us there. And so to me, it's like looking back at what you have done toward those goals and then setting or adjusting those goals and looking forward toward new projects.
Okay.
But in terms of measurement, like actually how much do you attain with those? It really depends on the media that you're using and what data is available to you. And, we can maybe get creative in terms of how we access that data or scrape that data.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how about if we do this? I don't want to totally lead the group with Rebecca's idea, but I forgot about it and it's a great idea. Are we all okay with the idea if we picked let's say a 10-day period in June and had some type of sprint like this where we kind of focused on looking at the website or other places, our other presence where people interact with us, and through that, I'll go back, Rebecca. I think we've got a lot of that stuff that you've done, and I think you started out with
we have a document.
There's a document, right?
I can share with you. Yeah, there's a folder Dave and I have that it's kind of the how-to do this, kind of the ground. It's like a charter is what we developed, to kind of the ground rules of how it works, and then. It's the setup, but I'll share it with you. And then if you wanted to I'm happy to fine tune it before I send it out to the group. But just to confirm, like I said, we use Slack because that's just the tool we were all familiar with. I mean, Jennifer, you and I can talk, but I don't want to assume that everyone's familiar with that or deeply enjoy it either. Everyone has
it's got its pros and cons.
The idea was having something that people would have relatively easy access to. They didn't have to be on a desktop, but if they had it on their mobile, and that could take many forms. We could do it in a variety. I think you could use a variety of tools to accomplish the same thing.
Okay. So is everybody okay as far as now kind of concluding our deal here? I guess that was where we were at. If we did that is our next step. I think I'm on board. Is there anybody? I guess are there any nays to this idea? Go ahead.
So my only thing in looking at sort of what you walked through and what we're about to do evidently is, you've got all these channels of marketing communication, and you have these various constituents. And I think based on what Rebecca had mentioned earlier is or someone had mentioned where you're seeing traction and actual, effective and where it's not. But I'd also like to, I don't know if it's a matrix or what, but your channels and your constituents, and what is your ideal sort of, tool or marketing strategy or tool towards those various constituents? Because, again, you have links. Links is something that is for adult ed, which is very specific to that, group. It's been very effective for me in what I do, but obviously specific because I'm dealing really directly and only with adult educators. So understanding those things in terms of, funders, instructional design, or volunteers and students, and then, maybe professional development folks too. So I don't know what that looks like or how that's formed, but I think it would be helpful as a framework for us to be thinking about things as opposed to these lists.
Which gets into the personas that Rebecca mentioned. Yeah, trying to think through.
Yeah.
And I think when we're setting up the sprint, that's a great suggestion, is kind of think of things through different lenses of how it would be perceived and how it's effective for different groups. When we're talking about outcomes, which group are we talking about?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I did set up I don't know if we're ever going to use it, but I did set up a Google Drive folder, which I have sent you a link to. You should have seen, and then a Google group. So if you do have something you want to post to the group, that's one option as we're moving forward. So in remaining couple minutes here, so I just look ahead look out for an email from me. We'll run with this. We'll run with the Strength idea. It sounds like there weren't any specific objections to it. So we'll go ahead and run with it. And in terms of time frame, how are people's schedules if we do like a mid-June? Are people going on vacation, or are there any particular dates we should avoid?
Mid-June, I mean, at the end of June, I'm going out of the country for 2 weeks, and the last week of June, first week of July. So that would be the only time.
Okay, so maybe if we just shot for like June 7th through whatever that would be, 17th-ish, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you all for your time.
Yep.
I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your input and what we're going to be accomplishing here. So thank you very much. And let me know if you have any questions either now or in an email.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
Okay.
you. Nice to meet everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Likewise. Thank you.